It is an honor to address such a distinguished audience within the framework of this event, organized by the Chamber of Commerce of the United States, a significant institution that promotes the enhancement of trade and investment between the United States and the rest of the world. At the same time, I am grateful for the constant support that the Chamber has given to my country to promote our intention to further deepen our trade relationship with the United States, our main partner in this sector. More than 2 years after the world has been shocked by the COVID-19 pandemic, it is evident that its short-term effects are not limited to health and affect all aspects of daily life. The collapse of health systems, the numerous human lives lost, and the deterioration of the economy have forced countries to adapt to the new reality, some with more success than others. At the beginning of the pandemic, Ecuador experienced a critical situation when the number of COVID-19 cases exceeded the capacity of the public and private health systems. Besides human losses, the confinement greatly limited economic activities, aggravating the state of an economy deteriorated by fiscal deficits and restrictions on foreign trade. One of the very first actions that my government adopted immediately after assuming the governance was the implementation of a vaccination plan to protect the population. The main objective was to immunize 9 million Ecuadorians within the first 100 days of government, a goal that was achieved ahead of schedule. This was possible thanks to the diplomacy of vaccines, in whose framework administrative measures were performed along with the manufacturing companies and allied governments, including the United States, whose generous donation of vaccines was an important component in achieving the proposed goal. By April 2022, the country has a complete vaccination rate of about 88% of the total population, which was fundamental to mitigate the impact of the Omicron variant, as well as to adopt necessary measures for the reactivation of economic activities nationwide. It does not mean that the pandemic has come to an end. The decisions of my government are made progressively and on a scientific evidence basis. In that way, it is possible to correct the direction if necessary. Nevertheless, it is essential to think ahead with optimism and enthusiasm, as with the hope that the threat of future variants, as well as the advancement of science as for vaccinations and treatments, allow us soon to return to complete normalcy. The pandemic has also produced long-term negative effects, both regional and global. The solutions will require a joint and coordinated course of action that allows the exchange of successful experiences and good practices, as well as the assistance to those countries that need it most. This harsh adversity that the planet must confront demands creative solutions. The economic resources of cooperation are essential for developing and least developed countries. However, it is vital that those countries can build their own resilience from external shocks in a sustainable manner. The pandemic caused serious consequences for international trade due to the restriction of activities and logistical constraints that disrupted supply chains. The consumers were constrained in their ability to satisfy their needs, while the producers faced the impossibility of placing their products in different markets. The result was a widespread recession and the loss of millions of employments. At present, inflation rates, the slow recovery of the labor market, the persistent logistical drawbacks of trade, and the increase in migration flows are evidence that resolving the negative effects of the pandemic will take longer than originally estimated. The International Monetary Fund has predicted that growth in Latin America would stagnate. One of the reasons for this phenomenon is the increase in inflation at the regional and global levels. The situation in Ukraine and the economic sanctions imposed on Russia due to its unjustified and unprovoked military action also have inflationary effects, especially on raw materials and food and energy goods. In addition to the impossibility of importing some products and supplies from conflict zones, several countries experience restrictions and limitations in maintaining their exports to these conflict zone countries due to the monetary, logistical, and competitiveness issues. In the case of Ecuador, sectors such as roses, bananas, shrimps, and soluble coffee will all have an impact of around $1.2 billion because they cannot export to Ukraine, Belarus, and Russia. Both the pandemic and the war have tested the effectiveness of global supply chains. It would be wrong to blame globalization for magnifying the effects of external shocks. That phenomenon has undoubtedly brought benefits in general. In Latin America, it is necessary to complement global chains with regional supply chains without closing the doors to trade coming from other continents. Regional initiatives will allow a faster reaction at continental level that minimizes exposure to global effects, economic phenomena over which there is no control. Therefore, it is necessary for countries such as the United States to reassess its current position of not negotiating new trade agreements. The existence of new agreements, especially with its partners in Latin America and the Caribbean, would allow it to solve many of the problems that it went through in the first months of the pandemic and that still goes through due to the disruption of global supply chains. Meanwhile, the market opening would generate growth and development for the countries of the region, which is critical for the continent to overcome the short and medium-term effects of the pandemic and to organize strategies to deal with the long-term effects. On the other hand, the creation of jobs, thanks to the opening of trade, will have a positive impact on the reduction of migratory flows that increased dramatically due to the economic effects of the pandemic. Besides benefiting the different economies of the region, the reactivation of labor markets will help alleviate the financial impact of the tension that countries such as Ecuador, based on their convictions, have provided to migrants, especially Colombians and Venezuelans, whether they are in transit or seeking refuge. The opening of trade and the economic development of the countries of the region must be supported by the arrival of investments, especially in infrastructure, which is why I consider the Build Back Better World B3W initiative, led by the United States, to be a success. The approach of boosting investment in infrastructure, health, and environmental conservation is an important component of what could be an alternative of regional consensus for the creation of initiatives for the reactivation of continental economy and the multiplication of shorter supply chains that complement those existing globally. The pandemic and the war in Ukraine effects on the American continent should be used to assess a necessary paradigm shift towards strengthening interregional trade ties to strengthen and multiply supply chains in the continent, so that producers have greater certainty about their business and consumers can benefit from a greater diversity of products and lower logistical costs. Besides the will of Latin American countries, the leadership of countries such as the United States is fundamental to the success of this proposal. Thank you all very much.